Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. All right. Hi, climate heroes and fractivists. Welcome to the California Crossroads Tour. Can you hear me okay? I invite you to come take your seats. My name is Becca Clausen. I am a co-founder of our local 350 Santa Barbara chapter, hosting this awesome event tonight. 350.org is a national organization of mostly volunteer community organizers like ourselves. Our vision at 350 Santa Barbara is to build an empowered community of climate advocates. We believe that the climate and anti-fracking movements are stronger if everyone participates. It's important that we keep coming together in a collaborative spirit, bringing our hopes, inspiration, and visions together for a stable climate and a more just world. Together, we form a resilient and growing movement of empowered earthlings ready to take a stand for social justice and climate justice. We're so glad that you all are here tonight. Last year, we made big waves by standing up to big oil and got Measure P on the ballot. Woo! Yeah! Some would have us slink away and regret the fact that we tried just because we lost. But we had to raise the issue last year because that is when the oil boom hit us. We are building a movement here, and the Measure P effort was successful on many fronts. Thanks to Exxon and Chevron, for example, we raised $7 million worth of awareness about the impending onslaught of new oil wells in our county, of which there are about 800 new wells in the pipeline right now. So this fight is anything but over. And tonight we hope that you commit to an active 2015 with us. Some other successes of Measure P. We successfully slowed investment into our county's oil fields for a critical 8-month period, long enough to let OPEC make local production economically less feasible. We brought an amazing group of people and organizations and elected officials together to fight the good fight. And we aren't backing down. We aren't going away. This is just the beginning. We're so lucky to have this tour here tonight. I wanted to thank all the members of the tour, Californians Against Fracking, for being here. I also want to thank the Measure P Army. Raise your hand if you gathered signatures, made phone calls, went door to door. Yeah. Donated. That was huge too. Thank you all so much. Thanks to our partnering organizations. Here with us tonight we have, raise your hands if you are standing near your table, the Permaculture Network. Thanks, Wes. We have the Sierra Club. We have CLUE, or Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. We have the Community Environmental Council. And the Environmental Defense Center. Sungevity is here as well. They're contributing to the March for Climate Action, Real Climate Action. So a big shout out to Sungevity over here. Thank you so much. All right, so a flow for the evening. It'll go like this. We have several speakers and then a joint Q&A session after that, and a few calls to action following the Q&A session. Please don't leave after the speakers. We want to get a community photo. It's really important, so don't leave until after the photo. We're also before you leave, we've got a petition to the Air Pollution Control District. A huge decision is being made tomorrow about the amount of pollution that our county will tolerate from new sources, aka oil and gas wells. They're a huge polluter in the county, and we need to make sure the APCD and our county knows that we expect them to have a zero threshold for their emissions. They have to account for everything that they pollute right now. And you can do so at the back table. There are a couple laptops there that you can sign. That would be great. Let's see. So I guess I'm going to be awesome. Okay, so now we have the wonderful David Braun. He's the founder of Americans Against Fracking, and now working closely with Californians Against Fracking. Where is David? All right. Oh.
Thanks, Becca. So they won that last round, but they are not winning this battle. And the cards were stacked against us. They had $8 million. What were we supposed to do? They spent more than Neil Kashkari did in fighting Jerry Brown to be the governor. Of course, they were telling lies. But the reality is we got the truth on our side, and this is the right fight to win. And that's what we're going to do. So, my name is David Braun. Thank you all for your work. You know, it takes a village, and I see it here. And I'm grateful and humbled to be a part of this movement and the work that you're doing. So thank you for every single one of you. You know, I often at these sorts of gatherings, I make a pitch about making your words realized, you know, that you say, oh, frackings or cyclical steam is a really bad thing. It's toxic for our children. Somebody should stop that. And I make a pitch and I say, well, you know, make your words realized, right? Like take action that's consistent with those things that you're saying. But that's already happening here, you know, and it's just going to keep growing. Because like I said, the truth is on your side. This is the right fight. And there is a beautiful world that's waiting to come. There is so many, the next 7 generations are relying on us to win this. So, especially as we're seeing with climate change. You know, the local chapter of 350 and the work that 350 does is so important in highlighting this issue. And the work, you know, Bill McKibben, you know, releasing that book, whatever it was, 25 years ago or something like that, that talked about this issue, right? Way before anybody really knew anything about this issue. And it's time has progressed, so has the need for us to actually address this issue. And so here we are. We even have Jerry Brown saying that this is an issue, that climate change is a serious problem that we're all facing. And in fact, that's true. We just saw that in Lima, that at this last climate conference that they had in Lima a month ago or whatever it was, that we actually heard dire warnings from some of these climate scientists talking about methane feedback loops, that as these methane hydrates that are under the Arctic Ocean, that those have the potential of melting. And then when they start to melt very rapidly, methane is a greenhouse gas that is 86 times more carbon intensive than over a 20-year period than carbon dioxide. So you don't really need very much to have a dramatic effect. And also what we know is that during the last ice age, that was actually what likely caused it. So truly, we are at a crossroads. We are standing looking into the abyss. And we can keep hurtling ourselves in that direction. And listen, Occidental and Freeport McMurrin and all those guys would be just happy doing that. They're happy making money off our lives. And so while they're fighting for their lives of their business, we're fighting for the lives of our businesses and our lives, literally. And so we stare into this abyss, and we're putting on the brakes. And we're choosing a different direction. And that's why I'm calling on each and every one of you, and Ash is going to be coming up in a moment to talk about this, but I'm calling on each and every one of you to continue this amazing action that you're doing here in this community, but to get on the bus. Get on the bus for the March for Real Climate Leadership. Got it. And so I challenge and I ask you, if you can't do it, maybe help somebody else to get on the bus. We could use donations. But this is a movement, and we're building an unstoppable movement. This tour has been amazing. We've had so many different partners and other folks from around the state working with us on this tour. We have Ethan working on the issue of oil trains. We've been talking with people with refineries. We are building a broad-based movement to bring about 100% renewable energy. We deserve a renewable energy future where we're not poisoning our neighbors just so we can power our lives. And you know what? We're going to get there. We're going to get there. And as Robbie's telling me, my time is up. So, like I said, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. There is a fantastic panel that is ready for you. That's waiting to come up and share lots of really great information. I'm going to be taking a step back and listening tonight and hearing all these great things that are being said. I urge you to continue on. This is something that we can realize. This is something that we came to do. We are the ones that we've been waiting for. Yeah, and we're going to deliver on that promise. Ash Loth from the Center for Biological Diversity, come on up. Let's talk about getting people on some buses. And some Jerry Braun.
Hey folks, I'm Ash. I work for the Center for Biological Diversity. I'm sure many of you are harassed by me via email, and now you have a face for that name. Hey! Okay, so I want to get you on a bus. I'm just going to be really upfront about that. I want you to get on the bus that goes to the March for Climate Leadership. I want you to get on the bus that's going to the March for Climate Leadership. Let me say that again. I think you really need to be on the bus for the March for Climate Leadership. And why I think this is so important is because of exactly what David was saying just a second ago, is that we're at a crossroads and we're at a really significant moment, not only in our lives, but in history. New York just banned fracking. Woo! San Benito just banned fracking. Woo! Mendocino County, Santa Cruz, Beverly Hills, Denton, Texas, Athens, Ohio, and Santa Barbara came close, y'all, and it's going to be next. It's going to be next. And the reason why this is important to note and to celebrate our victories is because the other place that's next is California, and Jerry Brown is next. And that's why we named this tour the March for Real Climate Leadership. Because although Jerry is a great champion on renewables and solutions, and I don't want to underplay that, I also don't want to underplay the fact that he isn't addressing the carbon bomb that's being released by hydraulically fracturing cyclic steam and acidizing the earth underneath us. And if he wants to be a real climate leader, he's got to show up. He's got to be there. He's got to be there for us and for our kids. Where's Hazel? Man, he's got to be there for us. And if he wants to be remembered as a leader and have a legacy, then he's got to do it. Or else we will, or else I'll do it, or else you'll do it. You all are here, and I want you to be there with me and the rest of our crew in Oakland on February 7th, because I want all of us to march down the streets of Oakland. I want us to raise our voices, and I want Jerry Brown to be so frightened that people in California are standing and coming up in his hometown by the thousands to make sure that they demand a better future than what he's going to give us right now. And that's why I really, really want you to get on a bus and come to Oakland on February 7th. Thanks.
Raise your hand if you've purchased your bus ticket already. Right on. We have a laptop back there so that you can purchase them here tonight before you leave. Please do so. Up next, we have the wonderful City Councilman Greg Hart. He was an early and steadfast supporter of Measure P, for which we are so thankful. He wants to share a brief vision for 2015 with you all.
Well, thank you all very much for coming out on a Thursday night, taking some time to engage on a critical issue. Obviously, we all know that climate change is the defining issue of our time. There's so much work to be done. Santa Barbara, historically has been an incredible environmental leader on a lot of different issues. We want to reclaim that leadership. Certainly, the community effort that went into Measure P was a big step in that direction, and we are going to ultimately be successful on those issues. But in the meantime, there are other things that are also pressing and important to address as well, and one of them is trying to give local residents a choice about the kind of power that they use in their homes. This is something that I think is really undeniable, and a great opportunity presents itself this year in Santa Barbara and South Coast. That's community choice aggregation. That's the techie term that we have historically used to talk about it, but I think that's really a very difficult mouthful to digest. So maybe something that's a little more accessible and understandable is green energy, local power. That's another concept. But most importantly, I think what we need to do is start to figure out a way to have those words mean what they are, which is essentially people who live in Santa Barbara County ought to have the choice about what kind of power comes into their homes. It's just that simple. It's about choice. It's about giving people the opportunity to make the choice for themselves as to the kind of energy that they use and the impact that that has on the planet. I think that's something that just about everybody can agree on. There's obviously going to be some discussion and some work that's necessary to get there. About 5 years ago, the City of Santa Barbara, the County of Santa Barbara both initiated an effort toward this. The recession kind of stalled out the momentum of that effort, but we're about to revive that. In fact, at the City of Santa Barbara, we have a sustainability committee that's going to be meeting in February to begin discussions about moving forward on this effort. We need all of you that are here tonight to come to that council meeting in mid-February. We'll let you know specifically the date and time, but having this kind of energy in the room to persuade my colleagues, frankly, on the council to really get behind this, to put some money behind it, to move forward, to have it be not just something talked about, but something that's achieved in 2015 is at the top of my agenda. I hope it's at the top of yours, and if we work together, we can succeed in this year in pulling something like this off. So thank you for your support of that. We'll see you at that meeting.
Thank you, Greg. That sounds like a great goal for 2015. All right, next up we have Dr. Kevin Beckmen. He's a board-certified family physician and has been practicing in the San Ynez Valley for 15 years. He has twice been awarded San Ynez Valley Cottage Hospital's Physician of the Year, is a recipient of the People Helping People Volunteer of the Year Award, is a wild horse advocate, and a lifelong environmentalist. Thank you, Dr. Kevin Beckmen.
Hi, that's me. And what got me into thinking about toxins and pollution and what all this is doing in our environment is two things. One thing was Measure P, which really inspired me to learn a lot about that. And the other thing is in dealing with patients on a day-to-day basis and kind of diagnosing breast cancer and prostate cancer and neuropathy and Alzheimer's disease. What is going on in our world that is making us so sick? And one of the things is high-intensity oil extraction that I'm just going to call fracking because it rolls off the tongue more than acidization and cyclic steaming and all that stuff. So when I say fracking, I mean all that stuff. Next slide, please. These are the two sources that I made. Health effects of fracking. Okay, these are the two sources I looked at. When I was going around and talking about Measure P, actually I had a hard time finding lots of information, anything more current than 2009, and came across these two documents that were presented to the people in New York State, and they're very complete, and I went through them, and I'll kind of pulled out some interesting things for us to talk about tonight, and if anyone wants to check that out, they can. Next slide. So quickly, I'm going to talk about 3 different ways that these toxins affect us. When they affect our cell membranes, the next they affect our hormone receptors. You'll hear that, and the next, actually, they affect the actual DNA in our nucleus of our cells. Next slide, please. So this is a representation of a cell membrane, and what you see is what we call the hydrophobic and hydrophilic regions of that. And on the inside of the membrane is where it's an oil-based thing, and oil and water repel, and that's what makes a membrane. And you can see those other things in there are proteins and receptors. And so what happens is a solvent, an organic solvent, will go in and break apart that cell membrane, causing damage in the cell, and it'll release these proteins, and maybe the cell will die, or maybe the cell will live and be permanently damaged. And certainly longer living cells like neurons, for example, will get damaged, repair, but not be the same. And so I see a lot of people with peripheral neuropathy, that we don't have reason why. I see Parkinson's disease and these degenerative neurologic conditions, and I really wonder. And this is one of the ways we're affected by these chemicals. Next slide, please. Also, you hear people talk about, especially if you read through these reports, hormone receptors and these hormone-active chemicals, and this is kind of what it looks like, but the hormone kind of plugs in. You see the cell membrane there, and this big protein, and the hormone comes and activates that. Next slide, please. So the steroid comes and activates that, and it goes down into the DNA and tells the cell to do whatever the cell is supposed to do. Well, if you have an abnormal signal and it goes in there and it's driving the cell, or it goes in there and it's blocking, and you're not getting this DNA activity, you'll have abnormal cellular activity. And we know that breast cancer is very hormone sensitive. We know that prostate cancer is very hormone sensitive. Thyroid cancer is obviously an endocrine gland. There's lots of endocrine problems that people have out there that we know are caused by this. Next slide, please. This is a DNA molecule, kind of a skip picture of it. I like it. In the middle is where it splits, and that's where the genetic code is, and the codons, and just to review our biology. Next slide, please. Something goes in, breaks that DNA apart, and hopefully the cell dies. I hope your cell dies, because if not, you're going to have an abnormal DNA, and it's going to do some things that you don't want it to do, and that is how these mutations happen, and we develop cancer, and so forth. Next slide, please. So the main toxic chemicals that I find in all these reports are benzene, toluene, xylene, and radioactive isotopes. Benzene, for example, there's no safe limit. There's no safe toxic limit to benzene. So we're getting exposed to it. Toluene is the one that is the very hormone reactive, hormone driver. Next slide. So we all see these signs around our life. This one comes from Lompoc. It's there, they become so ubiquitous, we just walk by them. Oh, there's things that are causing cancer here, and we walk by it, and whatever. I would say that if you're newly pregnant or trying to get pregnant and you see that sign, you should run. Next slide, please. This was a kind of a shocking statistic here. This many Americans live within 1 mile of a well drilled, out of the population of 320 million. About 21%. Next slide, please. So effects on the unborn. This is really our most fragile time of our lives. Our most fragile population are the unborn. This was looked at in Colorado and Pennsylvania. From these studies in Colorado, they did a retrospective study, 124,000 births analyzed. Lower birth rates were noticed, 30% increase in congenital heart defects, lower IQ with all this exposure, and then a 100% increase in neural tube defects in the highest exposed people. The people with the highest exposure got neural tube defects. Next slide, please. So what does that mean? So when we're about 21 days old from conception, we look about like that, kind of like a little worm. And we kind of go through this folding, and that folding is what makes us a vertebrate. And if we interfere with that folding, we get a spinal cord defect. We can talk about it happening on day 22, for example. No head closing, no brain forming, something called anencephaly. More commonly, down at the bottom, we call that spina bifida. That can be from something we just noticed on an x-ray to someone who spends their life in a wheelchair. So that's why I would run from that sign if I was pregnant. The next slide, please. This is just where we are. There's 10 miles. All those black dots are active wells. Just to put it in some perspective. Next slide, please. Hormone disruptors. Here's a couple of this one interesting thing. They exposed living cell cultures to water samples near a fracking site that showed anti-estrogen and anti-androgen effects. The second one, calming fracking chemicals were just found to not only do estrogen and testosterone, but progesterone and cortisol and thyroid. They looked at 24 of the most common fracking chemicals. 24 of them cause some sort of hormone disruption. Next slide, please. Cancer, it's obvious, but high incidence of leukemia, lymphoma in men living near high-intensity oil extraction. Stanford and Duke universities found halogenated disinfectants that cause, colon and bladder cancers, and the list kind of goes on. Next slide, please. Other health effects, unsafe jobs. We have these jobs, but North Dakota is now the most unsafe state for workers. For us, there's stress, noise, there's a higher incidence of STDs. Go figure. Affects our habitat, wildlife, air quality. Next slide, please. I was asked to just think more globally, and so talk about the overall health effects of global warming, and I would just say that the most poor regions are affected. Next slide, please. This is from the CDC website, cdc.gov. It's pretty self-explanatory that goes through whether it's from natural disasters, whatever. Next slide, please. In the United States, we're looking at new West Nile virus from these vectors of mosquitoes. It gets warmer, the mosquitoes don't die. Expanded range of Lyme's disease. Next slide, please. Was in Cambodia a few years ago, and they have a severe outbreak of dengue fever as a result of this, and children were dying left and right. 30-fold increase in dengue fever in the last 40 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kevin. I hope you all gleaned some useful facts that you can use in talking about these issues with other people that you know. Maybe you know people who were uncertain about how to vote on Measure P, and you can bring up some health-related concerns. Next up, we have Dr. Tim Krantz. He's a professor of environmental studies at the University of Redlands. He teaches and has been working in the field of environmental impact assessment for 38 years and has particular experience working with environmental remediation of oil, gas, and chemical spills. He worked on the Guadalupe Dunes groundwater contamination plume in northwest Santa Barbara County, southeast San Luis Obispo County, wherein Unocal had illegally injected 12 million gallons of benzene into the Santa Maria oil field during the 1970s and 80s. Dr. Tim Krantz.
Welcome, everybody. It's my pleasure to speak to you tonight. I don't know if I'd call it a pleasure, actually, but I feel it as an obligation to let you all know what's going on already in and around your neighborhoods. After the press conference earlier this afternoon around noon, I went back down and went for a walk on the beach with my wife and my dog. And we got down to the beach. There's a nice, beautiful day today, nice onshore breeze coming off. And I told my wife, I swear I'm smelling polyaromatic hydrocarbons. Not a real romantic thing to say, but PAHs, this is naphthalene and some really nasty chemicals. They're aromatic, they're volatile, carried in the wind. And it's coming from those oil wells offshore. they're already fracking those as far as we know. There's clear evidence that there may be fracking and acidization going on in the oil wells immediately offshore. And they're bringing up product water. They don't bring up wastewater. They call it product water, as if they're making water. They're bringing up this produced water, and what do they do with it? They just re-inject it if it's on land, or on those offshore oil wells, they're just letting that go into the open ocean. Let me tell you what's in these wells. In April, I saw the Department of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources, the watchdog agency in California. This is primarily a pretty oil industry friendly group. Shut down a few wells in Kern County. And I thought this was pretty alarming what I saw. These were wells that were in the vicinity of fracking injection wells. They weren't the fracking injection wells themselves, but they showed some pretty alarming things. They were very high in a naturally occurring mineral called thallium. Thallium is pretty toxic in the environment, but if we leave it down in the Monterey Shale, no worries. Another common compound in the Monterey Shale are sulfates. Thallium sulfate, once they bring these up and they expose it to the surface environment, thallium sulfate is rat poison. Literally, it's rat poison. It was at 4 to 5 times the maximum contaminant levels allowed by the US EPA. And this is in municipal wells and agricultural wells, not the fracking wells. And this was alarming to me. This told me that it's not just fracking. This happens with cyclic steam or acidization, any of those enhanced oil recovery methods. They don't just do this stuff, it's enhanced oil recovery methods. I love the euphemisms. They don't spill oil, it's released. It's like they're freeing the oil. But in any case, this is the same stuff that could be happening with cyclic steam. One of the arguments that was given to you in defeating Measure P was that, oh, we're not fracking, we're going to use this clean stuff, no chemicals, just cyclic steam. We're going to inject this steam down into these old wells. It goes laterally out. They literally explode the steam back up into the shale to liquidize the gas and oil and bring it back to the surface with their product water. And so they're bringing this back up, and it releases and solubilizes, makes liquid and more fluid, the oil and gas, but also all these other naturally occurring minerals. Thallium, sulfate, rat poison. Another great euphemism is what the industry calls naturally occurring radioactive materials. Norms. Yeah, norms. This is radium, radon, thorium, strontium. Radioactive minerals, they naturally occur at depth in the shale deposits, but they're bringing this back up in the product water. Add to that the technologically enhanced norms. These are real highly radioactive chemicals that they inject purposefully into the wells so that they can read them with their Geiger counters from the surface and tell exactly how far out the fracking projections are going, or the cyclic steam projections. So these norms and TENORMs are coming up in this product water too. So I thought this was pretty bad news in April. And then Dogger took the bold move of shutting down some wells, some injection wells in the areas of Kern County. Okay, these injection wells were coming up. They bring up product water, 1 to 2 million gallons of it, by the way. And in these injection wells, they had hits of benzene. The doctor just told you what benzene was. There's no safe exposure to benzene. 7,700 parts per billion. The maximum contaminant level of EPA is 5 parts per billion. This is 1,540 times the maximum contaminant level allowed by EPA. Benzene is a solvent, right? It's gasoline. It's very highly volatile. So if you bring it to the surface, it's going to volatilize into the air. It's a component of gasoline, right? We've banned this for air quality impacts around gas stations for 30 years because gas attendants were dying of cancer. So now we have hoods that suck and prevent that benzene, the volatiles, BTEX, from being released to the atmosphere in a gas station, but not in a containment cell that has 1 million gallons of water right next to the farmer that's growing your produce. The guys working on the well have respirators and full body suits because if you touch this stuff, it goes through your skin. The farm workers working right downwind from it have no protection whatsoever. This is bad news. When I first saw 7,700 parts per billion, I thought, no, there's got to be some kind of mistake. A decimal point or 2 or 3 off. No. And this is typical. Benzene is the most common, what they call propans or diluents, the most common solvent used in a fracking well. My first experience with this type of operation was before we called it fracking. I was working with an environmental engineering company that was called in to, my job was to look at how to clean this stuff up once it was brought to the surface from an oil spill, an oil release. And so I worked in various contamination sites up around the Bay Area. And I was called down to this community of Guadalupe, just west of the town of Santa Maria. And the Guadalupe oil field had been using traditional oil well extraction, you know, the little grasshoppers that go up and down, for many decades. But the field was pretty well depleted. And so UNICAL, this is after the Clean Water Act and after the Safe Drinking Water Act that were enacted in the early 70s by none other than Richard Nixon. This is not a Republican-Democrat thing, by the way. This affects us all equally, regardless of party inclination. So anyway, they'd been ignoring these limitations on these diluents in the oil well field, purposefully injecting benzene and kerosene into the old well field to solubilize and mix and liquidize the last bit of heavy, hard crude so that they could bring it up and pump it up. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that oil floats on water, right? We all know that. Well, the oil and the gas and benzene and kerosene rose to the surface of the groundwater table in Guadalupe. And then they begin to flow down towards, and they emerge wherever groundwater comes to the surface. And without going into hydrology, I can tell you that the groundwater emerges at the surface of a river. The river is at groundwater level. That's what makes it carry water on the surface, okay? So this is going down to the Santa Maria River, and it's moving towards the coast. It's going through this beautiful Guadalupe-Nipomo dune ecosystem, largest dune ecosystem in California on the Central Coast. You go down to the county regional park, Guadalupe Dunes Regional Park, and here were fishermen casting their lines out into the shore, pulling up some fish. Here were some dogs and children playing on the beach, making sandcastles. You know, when you dig a sandcastle, you've got to dig down into the sand a little bit. Well, groundwater comes out at sea level. Sea level is groundwater level. And so here's benzene plumes, kids digging sandcastles, and it's reeking of gasoline. The benzene plume, as it was moving towards the coast, came between the dune swales, and there used to be red-legged frogs and some other amphibians and things. Talk about canaries in a coal mine. They were dead. They were gone. And then it emerged on the beach. It took us some years before UNICAL finally copped to a settlement of $43 million at the time. Chump change. chump change. They had talked about all the oil well jobs. You'll hear this argument too. Oil well jobs. These fracking wells have a lifespan of only a few years. Most of these have already pretty well been spent. 5-7 years maximum. The real job security is in cleaning that stuff up. It's forever. It's for your children's and children's children's generations. And so the solution at Guadalupe, Unocal has installed a impermeable barrier, HDPE barrier, high-density polyurethane barrier that goes down through the dunes into and deep enough to intercept the groundwater, where the benzene floating on the top collects behind this barrier, and they pump it up and they put it into big wells in cement-lined containment ponds, and then they put it into trucks and they truck it somewhere. I'm not sure where, but that compound is still there. And so check it out. Look up Guadalupe, California on Google Earth and zoom in to the coast, and you'll see these Unocal containment vessels. There's job security for you. I trained some of my students in this field. So this is the alarming thing about fracking or steam injection or acidation. I don't care what it is. They all have this same effect. They all consume millions of gallons of water, 1 to 2 million gallons per well. Okay, here we are in California in the midst of an historic drought. We're spending so much of this precious groundwater. We will never, never in our lifetimes, children's lifetimes, grandchildren's lifetimes, clean up those groundwater reservoirs. It's hard enough to clean it up at the surface. It's impossible underground. And so this is our choice. Do we want to have the benefit of a little bit of cheap oil for the next 10 years? Or water? We can live without oil, but we can't live without water. Santa Barbara is particularly sensitive to that. You're not on the California aqueduct. You don't get this imported water. You've got to make do with what you have. You can ill afford to waste your water on fracking or enhanced oil recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. You each have 3x5 cards on your chair. If you come up with any questions that you'd like to ask, go ahead and write it down on that card, and someone will come by after our final speaker and pick those up. Next, we have Dr. John Foran. John Foran teaches sociology and environmental studies at UC Santa Barbara. He is co-director of the International Institute of Climate Action and Theory and a co-founder of the Climate Justice Project. Dr. John, oh, there you are. Woo!
Thanks, Becca. I'm just a mild-mannered college professor. Nothing very special. But when I hear about the situation in the Guadalupe Dunes, or when I hear a presentation about the chemicals that are used by the fossil fuel industries and are imposed on us by them, and when I think about the $7 million of dirty oil money that came into this county from outside to defeat Measure P, I get very angry. And then by the same token, when I hear an elected public official talk about something called local power, I get very inspired. I think that's a great idea. Local power is a very, very powerful meme. I really like it. I've never thought about it. And here's the deal. 2015 is year zero for climate justice. Emissions need to peak in this decade, or we've had it. The UN climate negotiations, which just met in Lima, Peru, and which I attended, can be described as a case of the emperor has no clothes. Or, and I saw an article titled this, it's Groundhog Day all over again. Because nothing good happens there, year after year. They've said that in December 2015, in less than a year, when they meet in Paris, they're going to deliver us a global climate treaty. It's quite clear that this treaty will not save us. It will not even lead to emissions peaking. The only good thing that happens at these UN climate summits is that it's an occasion for activists from all over the world, the global climate justice movement, to meet. And they use these meetings to build a movement. And that's what's happening at each of these meetings. And therefore, as Naomi Klein has so eloquently put it in her beautiful new book, we need to change everything. And I urge you to get her book. This changes everything. And in fact, I can get it free for you. I have a PDF of it, which she posted on a website, not telling a lot of people about, but it's out there for free. Or you can buy it for $20 and hold it in your hands. And I urge you to do that. It's all up to us. We need many initiatives. All the wonderful things that each of you are involved with, we need all of that. We need to be everywhere, in all parts of the country and the world, and working at every possible level and space. Here in our community, we need to stop dirty oil, and we need to build an alternative, climate resilience. In this state, we need to ban fracking and to make California what it could be, an international showcase for sustainable development. We need to bring the US government to the table as a responsible party to the global climate treaty negotiations and make our participation a point of pride by taking leadership in carbon emissions reductions and the transformation to renewable energy. And if Germany can do it, it's scandalous that the US isn't doing it. And perhaps most importantly, we need to be linking arms with our allies, Earth citizens everywhere around the world. We need to be inspired and get connected, as the title of this beautiful gathering tonight put it. We all have to ramp up what we're doing and what we thought we could do. And we have to do that without burning out. And the only way to do that is to love each other because we love what we're doing together. Or perhaps to love what we're doing together because we love each other. Or maybe both. What do we want? System change, not climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Next up, Emily Williams, California Student Sustainability Coalition Campaign Director, and I consider her the champion of the UC divestment movement. Emily Williams.
Good evening. Woo, I'm a little short. It is so great to see everyone here, and really exciting because especially, I'll be honest, I'm at a point that I was told tonight we need to be inspiring. You know, we need to talk about how to be really inspired, and I'm definitely at a point that, as John was talking about, I feel a little burnt out. And I think the reason I feel a little burnt out is because I've been putting a lot of stock into solutions I know don't work. Whether that's the UN climate negotiations and hoping that they're going to come up with a deal, that's a solution that's not going to work. Whether it's putting a lot of faith in industry and our elected government officials who have not yet accomplished the kind of things we need them to do, that's not going to work. So the question is, what is going to work? So as Becca mentioned, I work for the California Student Sustainability Coalition. The mission of this incredible organization, CSSC, is to empower, inspire, and engage students to transform their institutions into models of sustainability. What that means is getting students really, really active and engaged in looking at the places that they live, in the institutions that they're learning from, and figuring out how to transform them into these models of sustainability from the inside out to affect change on a larger level. I went to UCSB. That's the reason I got involved in this campaign in the first place. So I've been working on the fossil fuel divestment campaign since summer 2012. It's been a long haul, but that's okay because apartheid took 10 years. And the reason I got involved in this campaign is because it's the first one that actually gave me hope. And it's the first one that actually made me feel inspired, like I could actually be involved in something that was going to make a difference. That was actually going to help to slow the rate of climate change, maybe stop emissions altogether, and start to bring about the just transition to a low carbon future. So I also have had the pleasure, I don't know if I actually call it the pleasure, but I have had the opportunity to attend COP19 and COP20 in Warsaw and Lima, respectively. And that's what I'm talking about with false solutions. They're incredible, incredible spaces to go to the UN and to see so many people coming together, talking about, negotiating treaties and seeing all the activists that are there. And they're working like crazy, night and day, staying up all night long, trying to come up with a campaign or a demonstration that will get leaders to negotiate and actually put something on the table that slows the rate of climate change and that actually pays up for the historical damage that a lot of countries are facing that they weren't responsible for in the first place. And when you're in that space, you keep hoping, you keep thinking, maybe this text, by the end of this 2-week negotiation, maybe this text that they're going to come out with, maybe the developed countries are going to finally step it up and say they're going to really cut a lot of their emissions and they're going to start paying for the damage that they caused in the past. And it never, never happens. And if you keep believing it's going to happen that way, you're going to keep feeling uninspired and you're going to keep burning out. And so what do we need to actually make the UN move? What do we need to make international action? What do we need to get national action? It needs to start smaller and it needs to start from the grassroots. If we want to see anything happen in Paris at the next conference of the parties in the UN, we need to see national action. We need to see statewide action. We need to see us turning our own institutions into these models of sustainability so that we can start engaging our leaders, showing them by example, and then putting the pressure on them to make sure that they take that as a core value and go to the UN and actually negotiate for our futures. And you can do that in a lot of ways. You could do that by joining the fossil fuel divestment campaign. And a lot of students at the UC a lot of the students have been incredibly engaged in it. We've seen all but one of the undergraduate students' senates of the UC system pass resolutions in favor of divestment. UC Santa Barbara's very own faculty senate passed a resolution in favor of divestment. We have, I can't say who, but we have a couple of chancellors that might come out pretty soon in favor of divestment. We have a lot of movement happening at this level, and we can transform the UC, which then transforms California. Or we can go to this March for Real Climate Leadership, and we can show up in huge numbers and start to demonstrate for the change that we actually want to see. Which is pretty cool. But the biggest thing that we have to do is we cannot do any of these things in silos. As long as the UC divestment campaign doesn't show up to the March for the Climate Leadership, and as long as people working on Measure P don't show up to Black Lives Matter or any of the other demonstrations that are going on, as long as we don't show up to each other's events, we're not going to build the kind of movement that we actually need to influence change. Yeah. But the good thing is we've already started building coalitions, we've already started networking. So the main thing is we need to start talking to each other, we need to start showing up to each other's events, we need to start recognizing that stopping climate change requires system change, as John talked about, and that system change is not just about the environment, it's not just about justice, it's about everything together. So, have fun talking.
Thank you, Emily. Next up, we have Ethan of Forest Ethics. He's visiting us from the Bay Area. We're so glad to have him here. Ethan has spent the past 6 years fighting climate change and social inequity and brings a deep passion for movement building to Forest Ethics. He is here to talk to us about the dangers of crude by rail and what we can do about it. Ethan.
Hey everyone, it's an honor to be here with you all. I'm really inspired by all of the work that 350 Santa Barbara and all of you have done in the past few years in fighting fracking and working to build power in your community, and I know that you are going to win. So the issue I'm going to talk about is related to fracking and related to all of these other issues that we're seeing, because the core story is this, is that big oil is prepared to turn our communities into sacrifice zones for the sake of profit. And that is the bottom line here, whether you're talking about drilling for oil offshore or acidization or fracking or building pipelines through the heartland of our country, or the latest and greatest thing that's happening for the oil industry is moving millions and millions of gallons of toxic and explosive crude oil on trains. Brilliant, that's a great idea. And across our country and into California. In fact, if big oil gets their way and is able to build the infrastructure that they're trying to build right now in California, there will be more tar sands and explosive Bakken crude moving into California on trains every day than would carry oil from Canada to the Gulf Coast in the Keystone XL pipeline. Over 900,000 barrels a day, proposed expanded capacity for crude oil transport by rail in this state. So that is the situation we're dealing with. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the problem. What is crude by rail? What are oil trains? What do they mean? And why should we care about them? And then we'll try to be a little inspiring, because there are amazing things happening, led by the grassroots, as Emily was saying, that is happening across the state. So a couple of summers ago, actually, go back to 2008. In 2008, there were very, very, very few trains carrying oil across the country, really anywhere in the U.S. And what happened? What happened was the fracking boom in North Dakota. What happened was the rapid expansion of tar sands extraction in Alberta and the glut of oil production and the lack of infrastructure. And the work of our movement to slow and stop that infrastructure from endangering our communities. And so between 2008 and 2013, the oil companies moved 4,111% more oil on trains than in 2008. It is the most rapid increase we have ever seen. And the result? More oil spilled than in the last 30 years combined, just in 2013, off of trains. The result are catastrophes, because this practice isn't safe. They're moving oil on tank cars, these DOT 111s. You might have heard about them in the news. The reason why these are so frightening is because they are old, they're decrepit, they aren't regulated, and they are prone to puncture. And in 2013, on July 6th, in the middle of the night, when a bunch of folks were out celebrating at a bar, an oil train derailed in a small town called Lac-Mégantic, Quebec, and exploded and killed 47 people and destroyed the entire town and contaminated the nearby lake. And I can't even imagine. I think about that, and I can't even imagine what it would be like to have just everything that you know and dear and love destroyed by a town, by an industry. So there are 5.5 million people just in California that live in the immediate blast zone of an oil train. And why am I talking about this in Santa Barbara? Well, an oil company called Phillips 66 that operates a refinery just north of here, near Santa Maria in Anapamu, wants to build a new rail spur so they can bring oil through Sacramento, down through the Bay Area, through San Jose and down the Central Coast, and then also through Los Angeles and up straight through Santa Barbara, all the way on its way to a refinery in Anapamu. And that is a pretty scary project. However, the good news, and this is our movement, the good news is that in every community that has faced oil trains and that has organized from the grassroots in California in the past 2 years, we have won. We have beat big oil when they've tried to build new terminals. It shows that organizing works, right? And people showing up and saying, no, we do not want this, we do not need this. Our communities cannot be collateral damage. This is not right. And so what I'm inviting you all to do is to join us in fighting oil trains and stopping oil trains in Santa Barbara and in California. We have a petition to the San Luis Obispo County Board of Supervisors. Please sign before you leave here tonight. And in the next few months, there are going to be hearings where San Luis Obispo officials, the Board of Supervisors, will make the decision that determines whether or not oil trains move in Santa Barbara or not. So it is imperative that folks here get involved and make sure that the slow decision makers know that we do not want this here, and that nobody needs it. These are David versus Goliath stories, but these are winnable fights. And I invite you all to join us in the campaign, and together we can stop oil trains in California. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Ethan. I live in Carpinteria, about 300 yards away from the train tracks, and every night I hear a huge oil train go by. They're heavier, they're louder than your average train. It's very disturbing, so let's organize. Next we have Madeline Stano, staff attorney with Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment, and she is a Luke Cole Fellow. She will share a cautionary tale from Kern County and update us on the community organizing happening there.
All right, how's everybody doing? Thank you so much to Becca and to, sorry, I'm a little taller. Thank you so much to Becca and to all of you who are involved in putting this together. It's an honor to be here with you all. My name is Madeline Stano, so I am a staff attorney at CRPE. We are a grassroots environmental justice organization that combines community organizing and legal technical assistance to build power and stop environmental harms in low-income and communities of color. We have 2 offices, one in Delano, which is 30 miles outside of Bakersfield, and one in Oakland. So I wanted to start today by, here we go. This is the first time on the tour we've had the ability to use pictures, so I'm excited. Okay, I wanted to start today, you can go to the first slide, about unpacking the myth of green California. So the governor's getting national and international press right now as a climate leader, announcing his plan for 50% renewables in 2030. But that statement is really misleading, right? Because we're talking about both supply and demand. And we export oil in California. We are the 3rd largest oil producing state in the country, and the US right now, because, in my opinion, of technological advances and also targeted deregulation to streamline this process, the US is the 3rd largest oil producing country in the world for the first time in my lifetime. So we're facing a boom not just here in California, but across the country, and it's connected. So the fact that the governor's saying 50% renewables, what does that mean? He's talking about what we consume. Meanwhile, we are extracting increased amounts of oil on an ongoing basis. We had the draft environmental impact report that came out yesterday from state regulators. You might be wondering why a report that's assessing the risks of a practice is released after we've issued over 1,400 permits allowing that practice. And that's a lot goes into that. But it stems from a federal loophole that I want to introduce to you, which is the Halliburton loophole of the Energy Policy Act of 2005, which sets states up like California and local communities like Santa Barbara to scramble to try and regulate a practice because it exempts domestic forms of extreme extraction like fracking from our major pollution control laws. So that includes the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the majority of sections of the Clean Air Act. And these operators in Kern County predominantly, which is where I work on oil and gas issues, they were operating with a license to do pretty much whatever they wanted. And now we have this environmental impact report, and what does it say? It says there are risks, and we don't know how to mitigate it. It's a long report, but that's my summary. There are clear risks, and we have absolutely no idea, as the state of California, what to do to decrease those risks. What else does it say? Let's go to the next slide, please. So the Monterey Shale is big. This is old STEM data, but I'll update it for you. But it's to give you a general sense that lightish area is an EIA estimate of what is extractable from the Monterey Shale. That is a gigantic part of our state. Where have we been extracting with enhanced forms of recovery in the state of California? Over 96% of fracking occurs in Kern County, which already has, so we have 250,000 conventional oil wells in the state of California. 180,000 of those are in one county. Again, that's Kern County. We are exploding this county with all sorts of forms of extraction. And also in parts of Los Angeles that are similarly burdened by urban oil drilling and a number of other cumulative health point sources of pollution. So who lives in these places? What do they have in common? And why am I bringing that up? So we know from the report yesterday confirming it's not just someone who works at a NGO that has race in the name of it. The state yesterday confirmed that the majority of people impacted from enhanced recovery in the state of California and conventional oil extraction are communities of color. Additionally, they are majority Latino. And we have all sorts of data showing this, but I want to get into more the story of our work in Kern County, but I want to put that out there because it's important and it's not a coincidence. When you see how big this area is, industry likes to say, oh, it's just geology, right? But we all know that they think they can get away with things in Kern County that they don't think that they can get away with in Marin County. Let's just put it that way. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is talking about the wells. There are around 1,400 disclosed wells in Kern County that are doing enhanced extraction, but that number is wildly inadequate. So scientists that I've talked to that are analyzing all the sorts of data estimate it to be about 3 times that. So again, let's talk about our faith in the state to regulate this practice when they can't even count how many times. Several people identified all of the risks, how serious this is, what's at stake. We're not even counting where it's happening. Let's go to the next slide, please. So again, these are environmental justice populations. That's what we call them in my work, but that refers to communities of color and low-income communities. So this map is also state data, not my make-believe NGO data. This is state data from the California EPA. It's called the CalEnviroScreen, which is supposed to identify overburdened areas by pollution that are also more vulnerable because of social demographics and poverty to additional burdens. So their bodies are already taking too much in. So we have, the red is the highest 10% of the most burdened by pollution communities, and the orange is the 20%. So again, we're hitting the same people again and again. Next slide, please. So we got to this work at CRPE because we have a green and just economic development campaign. There are a lot of farm workers in Kern County, you might know about that. And those are the folks that I work with. And we worked for years to get access to land so farm workers could own and operate a sustainable garden, get their produce to market, have control, have fair wages, have safety so they're not, exposed to oil while they're picking our food. And at the grand opening of the event, we had that well looming in the background. And that was the first time we heard about it. So let's talk about problems of disclosure. When we first were working on this issue, it was me and 2 other folks driving around in the back of a truck with a Google map, putting stars on it to try and figure out where these wells were. We went to the city, they didn't know who operated it. We went to the county, they didn't know who operated it. We went to the state, also didn't know or weren't willing to share that information with me personally. So go to the next slide, please. We'll just scroll through these, Robbie. So this is just to give you a sense of how close it is to agriculture. All up in it. That's the summary. Sequoia Elementary School. I want to end with this because it's a summary of what's wrong and why our laws aren't enough, our governor isn't doing enough. So over 352,724 public school students are going to school within a mile of an active oil and gas well. So this gentleman identified the risks of when you are so close to extraction. These kids are within 1,200 feet of 3 active fracking wells. They're within a half a mile of 8 active fracking wells, and they're within 2 miles of 35 active oil and gas wells. We have a 10-year-old boy with prostate cancer. We have a 12-year-old girl who died of respiratory complications that were never fully diagnosed, that we don't understand. It also, you can see those almond orchards covered in pesticides. These are the communities that are being exposed, and this is how we frack in California. But folks are fighting back, and I know I'm running short on time, so just scroll, let's see what we can hit. Community trainings. We are active in Kern County. We are active in Spanish. We are at every hearing. We are collecting signatures door to door. Folks don't think these communities are standing up for themselves, but they are. The press isn't often covering it, but they're working hard and they don't want it in their communities. We're participating in the rallies. We're speaking in Sacramento. We're out there, we're partnering with other organizations to make sure the stories of Kern County are the focus of how we talk about fracking in California, because that's where we're fracking right now. And we're active in New York, we're everywhere. And you know what, hold on the sloth. So you all had a tough loss, and I hear you. I go to water board, I go to ag commissioner hearings in Kern County. I know what it's like to be the yoo-hoo in the room that's intimidated. I've been called a Middle Eastern terrorist plant. It's all sorts of stuff, and I hear you. But I mean, really, if I was a Middle Eastern terrorist plant, I would drive a car and not just have a really old bicycle, but that's a different story. I would at least hope. I hope you get better. I mean, the risks. Anyway, it's not impossible. There's resistance in Kern County. I want you to leave inspired. I want you to know that the folks who have the most at stake, who have job and family commitments beyond anything that I can personally understand, are out there lifting up their voices. I invite you to stand with them, stand alongside them, stand behind them, stand with them in Oakland, because they're getting on the bus. The 2 buses from Bakersfield are on their way, and you better join them. Thank you so much for your time.
Who's getting on the bus? More hands, come on. Raise up those hands. Who's getting on the bus? All right, let's go. Next up, we have Maggie Hall, staff attorney at the Environmental Defense Center, to give us a brief update on the recent offshore fracking lawsuit. She's going to speak really briefly, and then we'll go into an art project explanation and then our Q&A. So we're almost ready for Q&As. So be writing down your questions, please.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here, to be part of such an inspired group. And yeah, I found that all really inspiring, so thank you. I'm Maggie Hall. I'm a staff attorney at the Environmental Defense Center, and we were actually founded in light of the Santa Barbara oil spill. So these issues have been, the core to our organization from the very beginning, and we have had no shortage of work over the many, many years since 1969. So part of that is an inspiring story, which is that, the birth of the modern environmental movement came out of the oil spill, and was part of our founding. And thank you to one of our founders who's here in the room today, Mr. McGinnis. So EDC is a nonprofit environmental law firm that represents other groups, but then also brings actions and also gets involved in advocacy. And so most recently, I think it was already mentioned that offshore fracking has been occurring. So what's been happening, and it was actually not even known until just about 2 years ago now, that the federal agencies have been rubber stamping these permits for offshore fracking and acidizing, and there has been zero public participation and zero analysis of environmental impact. So you take all of the concerns associated with fracking, acidizing that happen onshore, and then you put them in our highly sensitive Santa Barbara channel, and some agencies didn't even know it was happening, let alone the public. So we are challenging this under the National Environmental Policy Act, and we were able to point to 51 permits just in the last year that authorize fracking and acidizing. Again, the agencies determined they were categorically excluded from the need to analyze their impact. So we think that's illegal under the National Environmental Policy Act. And again, that's just a very small handful of the permits and the fracking activity that's been occurring that poses significant threats. So we encourage you to get involved on every level that you can, because it does take every level. So get on the bus and also stay involved locally. We have a handful of projects in the pipeline onshore, and then there's sure to be action offshore. So please sign up on our email list over in the corner to get action alerts. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Maggie was a great attorney for us during the Measure P campaign. A lot of you probably recognize her from the hearings. All right, next we have Jessica Woolander to explain what the art project is all about. Jessica. All right. She's an organizer with Californians Against Fracking.
Hey, how are you guys all doing? We are bringing an art project with us on this tour that's going to land in Oakland. It'll be with us on the march. It'll be delivered to Jerry Brown. We're making puzzle pieces like this and the one in the back. The idea is that they're pieces of the solution. Jerry Brown is clearly missing a few pieces of that puzzle. So I would love it if you guys could go over to that table in the back, the front one, and write him a poem or draw him a picture or send him a letter about what the solution is to all of these problems that we've been talking about. Thanks a lot.
Okay, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to come sit up here for the Q&A period. If you could go ahead and pass your questions forward. The way this is going to work is that I guess I will be reading the question, and the panelists who would like to answer the question, please raise their hand, and Gary will turn on the mic for you in order to respond. Does that make sense? Okay. Questions? You guys passing up your questions? What are the legal impediments to a fracking ban in California as compared to New York? Something to do with current active production, maybe? Can anyone speak to that?
Yeah, we can. Okay. Yeah, so there are no legal impediments to Governor Braun doing well, not exactly. They're vested rights. So existing oil production, it's complicated, but it's a point of contention, and courts will struggle with that. It's certainly an area that is up for interpretation and up for a fiery argument. What we can most certainly do is the governor, through executive order, could issue a moratorium. So he has an emergency power. If it rises to the level of a certain emergency, he's able to issue that. Additionally, it could be a ban on future extraction or future projects. So, yeah, but it's complicated.
Sorry, I'm trying to read the handwriting. Okay. question number 1. How are lower oil prices per barrel affecting the fracking industry in California? Is it or isn't it? Go, Madeline.
Okay. I don't want to be a Mike Hogg, Mariah Carey. Okay. Yes, so it is. We know, so since it's gone under $50 a barrel, there are a couple really good articles in the Bakersfield Californian and in The Economist and in Forbes, and if you want to nerdily track this, you can. So one of the articles has said that the most junk bond filled oil and gas projects in the United States, the most vulnerable at this time, are those oil enhanced extraction in western states like California. We have already started to see a series of layoffs in Kern County. Pink slip, 300 guys at a time. We had the first round at the beginning of December. We've had a couple towards the end of December, right around Christmas. That was considerate. And then also in the start of January. So we're already seeing layoffs, at least in the valley.
Okay, so this might be a question for Maggie. Is there a record of how much fluid was pumped overboard in the offshore fracking? Do we know?
I don't know that there's. Go ahead. Just this one. A really good resource for that is that, as was noted, a lot of the offshore fracking fluids are dumped into the ocean, and there is a Clean Water Act permit that authorizes those discharges. So now the companies are required to disclose the chemicals that are in the permits, and this is a very new iteration of that Outer Continental Shelf in PDS permit, if you're interested in looking into the amounts that they're discharging as well as what those discharges contain.
I can add to that, just with regard to the total amounts of water that are being used in fracking. This just came out in an article in Scientific American yesterday. 87 billion gallons of produced fracking water have been produced in the United States, compared to 27 billion gallons of oil. So we're using about 3 to 1 gallons of water per gallon of oil recovered.
Okay, I think I have a rhetorical question here. What will save more water? What Governor Braun suggested, holding off on ordering a glass of water in a restaurant, or shutting down all fracking, or one fracking well? Oh, maybe it was a real question. We want to do a mathematical exercise here. Okay, so let's see.
I would say stay hydrated.
There we go.
Here's a question. How are we planning on reducing home heating and cooking use of natural gas to reduce our dependence on this resource? Anyone want to respond to that?
Turn your thermostat down.
Could I say one thing
in
response to that? Okay. So we all have to reduce our own consumption. Like, it's great to not drive 1,000 miles in your big Hummer, because that uses a lot of energy. But at the same time, we also have to kind of remember that living in the society that we live in right now, we don't always have the option to try to avoid using fossil fuels. So there's a really nice balance we have to play with. Part of it is trying to reduce our consumption, so looking into ways to sort of transform the home that you're living in, trying to reduce the use of natural gas, but then there's also a question of why is natural gas being supplied to your home instead of some other renewable form of energy. So I struggle with that day to day, and I think it's really important that we all kind of keep in mind, reduce when you can, but also remember that there are certain systems that has really built fossil fuels into the infrastructure that we use, and to dismantle that, part of that is personal choice, and part of that is trying to change the system that you're living in.
Thank you, Emily. All right, what about the jobs issue? How do green energy sources create jobs? Does anyone have any fun stats on green jobs?
I have a fun stat I heard earlier today.
All right.
That apparently $1 million of oil investment creates one job, and $1 million of renewable investments creates 2.5 to 9 jobs. So that's, I don't know where that stat comes from, but I heard it earlier today. Who was that? Yeah. Well, and those jobs don't kill us or our kids. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of great research out there. And I know there's amazing work being done by Mark Jacobson out of Stanford to look at how we can transition to renewables in the next few decades. That work is really good. Oh, there are flyers back there that David is holding up if you want to learn more about the Solutions Project. I don't know if anyone has anything to add.
Yeah, I've heard that stat before, that per dollar of GDP, one job is created for the oil industry infrastructure versus anywhere from 4 to 11 times that for renewable energy jobs. So let's do it, people. I'm having a hard time understanding this question. Dr. Tim, would you believe Dogger when they say Santa Barbara County Santa Barbara County testing of oil industry wastes do not contain norms of significance? Is that likely? Are we different geologically here in Santa Barbara County that we'd have fewer norms?
The Monterey Shale deposit is relatively uniform throughout the state, whether it be in Kern County, Santa Barbara County, San Luis Obispo County, or LA County. So it's the same deposits.
Thank you. Okay, another one for Dr. Tim. What was it that you smelled on the beach here? Can you be sure it wasn't from the natural seepage? I don't know if you're aware of the campaign to convince our local residents that oil seeps are natural and that we actually need to drill more oil to relieve those seeps and get all the oil out.
Well, I can only say that these were definitely aromatic, hydrocarbon-related types of things I was smelling on the beach, and in fact, the wind was coming directly from those oil wells, not from the sands elsewhere along the beach, where you might otherwise expect to have some natural seepage.
Okay, and do we have any data about local seawater and air contamination? If the beaches are contaminated, Santa Barbarans will care more if we can get that data. Do we have, like, what are the best sources for finding out local data of contamination studies? I know the World Business Academy recently commissioned a study for radioactive pollution on our beaches. Maybe heal the ocean.
Well, I think some really good data is going to come out of those Clean Water Act permits for the offshore oil platforms, because that will actually contain the chemicals used in fracking that's discharged into the ocean. So not only is there the discharge, but there's the risk of spill of all of those chemicals that go into fracking and acidizing to and from the platforms directly into the beaches or into the oceans, which affects recreation on beaches in the channel and on Santa Barbara and Ventura as well.
So that information will be forthcoming shortly? I mean, is that, you're saying that those studies are already done and we can research them, or they?
So the oil industry is now required to report those through the new Clean Water Act permit, and not all of those documents have come out because it was a recent revision to that permit. So it will be forthcoming.
Thank you. Okay, here's a question. How might we be able to remove the exemptions that the oil companies currently have from the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts? Madeline.
Well, the textbook answer would be Congress, but, you know, feel free to think outside the box. That's who signed it into law, and so you can't do it but, you know, states, that's the federal floor. So the states like California, if they want to rise up and be climate leaders that don't dump poison everywhere and brag about electric cars, they can, sorry, no, nobody, that was, okay, joke failed. It's okay, we're rolling with it. Just thinking out loud here. No, the states could enact something that was way stricter than that, so we have our own control laws that we could enhance through our state legislature, again, ellipsis, silence, crickets, for our ability to do that. But I mean, local I think the best chance for you all in Santa Barbara to get something really strong is not to go through the legislature, this is my personal opinion, but is to go, you have the local authority. So the strongest power in American law is private property owners to take care of their private property. And so the ability of your cities and your counties to zone and oversee processes that are happening, you could make it way stricter than the old lazy EPA. No? Wow. I'm really knocking out now.
Okay, here's a question. Where can we get a copy of Dr. Beckman's slideshow? Can we share that, Dr. Beckman?
From my secretary.
Rebecca August. No, you can email 350santabarbara@gmail.com and we can give you a copy of that, I think. Is that cool?
That's fine, yeah.
Yeah, email us. I think we're out of questions. Anybody else have any questions? We got a few more minutes on this.
Where can we download the Emily Klein's PDF?
If you email me, I'll figure that out, and we could also probably post that if 350 wanted to.
Should we post it on the 350 website?
Yeah.
350sb.org in the next few days. Oh, okay, sure.
I've got a question sort of related to Ethan's presentation, that here in Santa Barbara County, we've got this issue, if we consider right over the river in the Como, Santa Barbara County, which I often use, they call it the Santa Maria Phillips refinery there, that all these rail trains will be coming into. But right here within the county, 4 miles outside of Santa Maria, we've got crude oil from Greca being processed, and what's going out of that refinery are gas trains, which are equally as explosive, I believe. And I think we sometimes lose track of crude oil as an entity, but the reality is with the pollutants and all the things that are being produced at our local refineries up on the Como and in Santa Maria, we've got some pretty toxic products going out of the county by rail train. Do you know which one? Can you please summarize that? I have yet to figure this out from Greca, exactly where and I am trying to.
So I'll just summarize quickly. Jane is bringing up the fact that out of the Greco refinery, we not only have a problem with the crude oil, but we also have a natural gas transport system, right? Tankered out by rail. Okay, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, we'll definitely be talking to folks up there about that. Wes.
Yeah, Greco also runs trucks out, almost 12-hour shifts, running trucks down to LA to refineries for the real dirty crude, the sulfur, and they're running it there, and they also run it to Bakersfield to the pipeline there. And I had a friend who worked for them, so they are running 10 drivers and running 12-hour shifts, sometimes 14-hour shifts.
Wow. Okay, so what Wes is bringing up is that we not only have a train issue out of Greco, we have trucks transporting this heavy, dirty stuff. And I think Ethan wants to comment.
Yeah, I think this just speaks to one of the main challenges with the glut of extreme forms of extraction, of oil extraction and transport that we're seeing across North America. Because whether it, like, for example, tar sands, what they want to bring by rail into the Phillips 66 refinery produces a much larger volume of byproducts, whether it's benzene and like chemical byproducts or actually like other chemicals that are used for pesticides and other industrial practices. So we'll see an increase in refineries across California are actually trying to expand their operations to be able to capture and sell a lot of these byproducts. And so we'll see an increase in that type of activity as well if we allow big oil to continue to expand extreme extraction and expand extreme transport of oil like tar sands.
Okay. Just quickly, I feel compelled to bring Mark Manning up here. He is a documentary filmmaker and has been doing some amazing and powerful research that's very relevant to our local area. So he's going to do 1 minute summarizing like decades of work.
Okay. I think she wanted me to talk about the dispersants. I've been down in the Gulf of Mexico, 1 minute, covering the BP oil spill, and they sprayed dispersants on the oil. Do you guys know about this? Okay, so it created a highly toxic substance in the oil, and the oil dispersant mix turned into a solvent that got into the ecosystem, it got into the fish, it got into the people, and it created a huge health problem down there. The problem with that is that's now the oil spill response plan nationwide. And the dispersants are already stocked here in Point Hueneme, they're in Oakland, they're in Seattle. They're the reason they're getting permits to drill. So if there was a spill out here tomorrow, they would be spraying dispersants that's pre-approved. And the Coast Guard and the Air Force would spray it. So something to think about as they're talking about the Tranquilian Ridge and developing the offshore sites. It's on the barges, it's at clean seas, and if there's a spill, before you have a chance to react, the planes will be flying and they'll be spraying.
For those of you who saw our 5-minute long video during the campaign, he's the guy who made that. The video that had, and to just give you a visual, the images, those powerful images with the kids with the huge rashes and their skin falling off and stuff like that, that was from his research that he's done in the Gulf about the dispersants. So very disturbing issue. All right, so that's the end of our Q&A session. I wanted to ask David Braun up here for a quick announcement.
So to do a lot of this, it takes a little bit of money. And like I mentioned before, we are trying to get people on the buses. And so if you can't make it on a bus, but you may have the means to help somebody else do so, we don't want to turn anybody away. We really want people in the streets of Oakland. So if you can help, we have a basket in the back, and we'd love for you to maybe fill it with something, preferably green, that actually exchanges for monetary value. So that would be fantastic. We also have T-shirts that are helping us get around the state. If you would consider buying a Californians Against Fracking, donating your money in exchange for a Californians Against Fracking T-shirt, that would be fantastic. There is the basket. Becca has it there. I think we'll maybe pass it around a little bit. Great. And then I also want to mention that Sungevity is here with us this evening. Sungevity was started by a gentleman named Danny Kennedy who used to work with Greenpeace. And so his way of actually going to bring about renewable energy was actually going into commerce and working in this way. And so, you know, they are very highly rated in terms of their customer satisfaction, and we're very pleased to have them with us. They've actually enabled us to bring along our videographer and actually document this. So that's been fantastic, and we're grateful to have them as partners. So thank you so much. And then that's the only thing I have to say, other than I wanted to just make a quick comment. Madeline said, don't let them tell you that you can't win this. And I think we're in a place of actually living proof of that. Among the other things that I mentioned before, I was also a founder of New Yorkers Against Fracking. And when they told us when we founded New Yorkers Against Fracking that there was no way that we were going to stop fracking from coming into the state, and this was even, we had environmentalists that were saying this to us, like physically, politically impossible. And we said, thank you very much for your opinion.
Thanks for that wonderful reminder, David. Thank you. All right, so next we have our student visioning statement. Kiyomi DeZoiza and Miranda, I'm going to murder this, Omahani. Miranda Omahani, please come up. Thank you.
I'm Miranda.
I'm Kiyomi. I'm so honored to be here with y'all today.
All right, and as students, we ask,
how useful is an education when we live in a world that can't sustain human life?
what is the use of oil and natural gas if we don't have clean water or air?
Why be at the mercy of huge corporations content to poison the necessities of human life for profit?
Aren't we the future generations that policymakers always talk about?
If we don't address the climate crisis, what will be the use of all of our work in social justice?
Shouldn't we have the right to control our own homes, water, and food?
Why continue to avoid action for the future generations when we are the future generations amongst you?
For these reasons, we are committed to dedicating our time, enthusiasm, and expertise to the fight against fracking and all industries that threaten our future.
We are committed to developing a future of clean energy and a socially just society.
This livable future is not going to create itself. It will come with hard work and dedication. And for that reason, I'm committed to UC Fossil Free and Students Against Fracking on my campus.
And that's why I'm actively involved in other social justice movements as well, such as Black Lives Matter, because I recognize that these struggles, our struggles, are intimately connected, intertwined, and inseparable from one another.
To break through the velocity of big oil with all of its money and power, we need solidarity and commitment. To me, solidarity is the mutual support of different groups working together toward the same goal. And every person who is present makes a difference.
The student voice, when organized, is loud and powerful, and we are not backing down.
So for that reason, I'm committing to go to the march in Oakland to be a voice for Students Against Fracking.
Today, I challenge you all to make one specific commitment for yourself, whether that's getting more involved in your local community or hopping on that bus to Oakland.
And I challenge you to act in solidarity with the movement that you've supported in hearts and thought.
It is up to us. The change is up to us, because together we are powerful.
Together, we can do this.
Change is up to us, and we can't wait for anyone else.
What will you do to reclaim our future?
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. All right. So in closing, I'd like to invite you guys to fill out the survey cards there that you see on your seats. We'd like to know, in what ways would you like to get involved with us? Action is the antidote to despair. That's definitely true for me. That's why I'm addicted to this activism stuff. So please join us. And I want to invite you to bring yourselves to this cause. The world needs us to be fully ourselves and to do the things that make us come alive. Those in power need us to demand real climate leadership now. Stanford engineer Mark Jacobson has published many studies showing that we absolutely have the technology and capital to be 100% renewable by 2050. His scientific conclusion is that we lack the political will to achieve this goal, and that is where we all come in. Politicians don't build political will, they respond to it. Let's make it crystal clear to the fossil fuel industry that their days are numbered. That everywhere they turn, there we are like a massive swarm of bees, stinging them with divestment, local bans, carbon pricing, marching in the streets, speaking at hearings. All of it crucial. Action is the antidote to despair. Join us. Get on the bus. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for our awesome panelists. Do not leave because we need a community photo. Are we doing that up here? At the front. Come up to the front.